When I am asked about raw milk, I half jokingly first respond, "Do you have your own cow?" Now let's remember, breast milk is raw milk, so obviously raw milk can be consumed. And raw milk can contain a lot of nutrients, and there may be some benefits over pasteurized milk. But contamination is a real issue, and that's what the concern is. So let's talk about it. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. David Berger, a board-certified pediatrician in Tampa, Florida. I'm a holistic/functional medicine doctor, and with that, I do seem to attract families who some of them wish to consume raw milk, and that has been the case for the past 25 years. So I do have patients who are consuming raw milk, and I can say so far I have not seen any problems with any of them getting sick from contaminated milk. But that's not to say that it can't happen. Now, as with most issues, things are not cut and dry, but I'm going to present to you the different sides and really even question whether we need to be drinking any kind of milk whatsoever. So let's start with that. Now, back in 1996, I had the wonderful pleasure of attending a grand rounds at Tampa General Hospital that was provided by Dr. Frank Oski. Now, he is considered the father of modern pediatrics. There are two pediatric textbooks that residents use. There's the Nelson and there's the Oski. In addition to that, he wrote a book called Don't Drink Your Milk. And let me get the subtitle right. The Frightening New Medical Facts About the World's Most Overrated Nutrient. Now, again, this was not a rogue individual. In fact, he was the former president of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and he was also the former chair of the pediatric department at Johns Hopkins University. And really, he was just one of those people who just everybody admired and loved. And his mentor, Dr. Lou Barnes, he's the one who founded the pediatric department at Tampa General Hospital, and he was one of my mentors. And he came in and would talk to us about the importance of breast milk, B vitamin metabolism. All of these things are needed. And in fact, he's the one that coined the term of which Dr. Oski would often quote that says cow milk is for cow babies, human milk is for human babies. And he would point out that humans we're the only animal that puts another animal's milk into our body in the first place, and for sure the only ones that do it once we've been weaned. So this is something a little bit different, and one of the things Dr. Oski would often talk about, which I've seen both in his book as well as in his lecture, he would talk about how breastfed babies would have IQ points on average when everything else was taken into account, IQ points 4 points more than a formula-fed baby, of which he then deadpan would say, and while that may not sound like a lot of IQ points, I sure wish I had them now. And he just told these wonderful stories. It's all in his book. I actually found the PDF for the book because it's now no longer in print, and it's down in the show description. So if you want to check out just all these little pearls of wisdom that Dr. Frank Oski, this radical past president of the United States, wrote about milk, please go there and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, in terms of milk itself, whether you're talking about raw milk or cow milk, it's not a superfood as in something that's essential to life. Why? Well, because we can get the nutrients that are found in any of these milks elsewhere. Calcium, protein, water, fat. Now, it's in a convenient package, and that's what can make it a healthy food because it's all right there. It is important to recognize, though, that it does not naturally contain vitamin D. It's added. So when you usually don't see that in pasteurized milk. In unpasteurized milk, in raw milk, but the pasteurized, it's added there. So let's talk a little bit about pasteurized milk. What is it? It's milk that's heated to a temperature that kills organisms, pathogens that may be in it from a contamination perspective. This is something that started happening in the mid-1800s. It became pretty common in the 1920s and became widespread in the 1940s. Originally, they were finding that it was killing off things like tuberculosis, diphtheria, infections we really don't see much anymore. Nowadays, it's more protecting against things like salmonella, E. coli, campylobacter, and these are the things that we often hear about food contamination problems now, whether it's from milk or not. We've also been hearing recent about bird flu, and let me explain about this. Okay, bird flu is a virus. It's not a bacteria. What they've been finding so far are particles of the virus, but they haven't been finding living virus. And there is no evidence at this point, no cases that bird flu itself is being passed along or could be passed along if drinking milk that has the particles in it. It's there, but again, it's important to be known. Now, in terms of the pasteurization, and I've read people who say, "Oh, it degrades the amino acids, the vitamins, minerals, or fats," and I found no evidence that that's true. The temperature does not degrade those. It can degrade immunoglobulins, the antibodies that can be found in milk, but there's a couple of things there. IgA, which is what's typically passed along in breast milk, is not much of that, nearly as much as in cow milk, about 15%. And there is some degradation, but there's not a lot there. IgG is the more common thing found in cow milk, and that doesn't seem to be degraded by high temperatures. Now, of course, there's another part there, though. The only antibodies that would be in any of the milks would be if the organism, in that case the cows, or goats for that matter, were exposed to those infections and therefore making antibodies. But a cow out in a field is not very likely to be exposed to most of the pathogens that we as humans, our children, would be exposed to. So is that really protective for humans? We don't know, right? But it is something. Now, as an aside to that, colostrum, which is the first, similar to human milk, taken from a mama cow or goat who had just given birth. Colostrum may be more protective, though, as it has much more in terms of what we call secretory IgA than the regular cow milk does. And that secretory IgA is what sits on our nasal linings, throats, our lungs, our intestinal tract, and serves as the first line of defense against infections. Now, what about raw milk? As it's not inherently unhealthy, but I also think it would be really kind of a misnomer to call it a ultra healthy food. Okay, as I said, it has all of those nutrients in there. Now, coming back to my comment though, of do you have your own cow? And I mean this, and some of my patients do, or they they'll have a cow like locally that they go, and 3 or 4 people may share the cow, and they go, they milk it, they bring it back for the table every day. And of course, in that type of situation where it's not a whole herd, it's the type of thing where if there's a cow or two, they can be kept much more regulated in terms of checking for infections, etc. And of course, that's what used to happen back in the old days on farms. People weren't bottling it and transporting it. It was really something that was like brought straight to the table on the same day. Even so, there were still contamination problems. So some of it. Okay. But at least if you have your own, and there's not much sit around time, there's much, much less likely chance of contamination. Now, it's also important to recognize that the overwhelming majority of food poisoning, of contamination, is not happening from milk, not happening from raw milk in this country. It's from produce. We've heard about the spinach outbreaks and some of these other things. But as a whole, just here's what the numbers are. On average, there are about 761 intestinal illnesses per year in all of America from raw milk. About 22 hospitalizations per year as well. There's also been 3 deaths between 1998 and 2018. So 3 deaths over the course of 20 years that have been attributed to cow milk. So again, this is not nothing, but of course, these are very rare, very, very small numbers. But of course, if God forbid it's you or your kid, then the numbers really don't mean so much if you catch it. Now, there are, in terms of other benefits to raw milk, just we have it all out on the table. There are some studies that have shown that raw milk is less allergenic and can reduce allergic potential. And I did, again, put links to studies down in the show description so you can see where these are coming from. Most recently, I was looking at some articles from the Journal of British Society. Pardon me, let me say that again. The Journal of the British Society of Allergies and Clinical Immunology. And in this one paper, they quoted several different studies showing that the adverse effects of milk heating, so pasteurization, on the allergy protective capacity of is much more than the raw milk. So raw milk, they did find some other allergy protection that regular cow milk seemed to have lost. So there was some protection there. But also they did something interesting. They were looking at mice. And they said that mice that were sensitized to raw milk when they were given raw milk originally, as opposed to when given processed milk, when different allergies were injected into their skin to see if there would be an allergic reaction, kind of similar to like an allergy skin test that we do, as a whole, the mice who had the pasteurized milk we're more likely to have allergies overall with certain swellings of the skin comparing to the mice with the raw milk. Now, I'm also asked about goat milk, and goat milk I think is actually healthier than any form of the cow milk because it's much closer to human milk in its constituency. Of course, one can have raw goat milk and pasteurized milk. It's all of that information that I just said is the same for goat milk, but a little plug for goat milk. And even, I do recommend goat milk formula in babies who can't breastfeed or who have to stop breastfeeding over cow milk. It's a very routine thing that I do in the practice. Now, also, if we're talking about not getting any form of dairy, let's talk a little bit about other sources. And of course, there are things like plant-based milks. It's obviously that is an ultra-processed food to get that in there, and the calcium is added to it. But it is this way, and it's certainly for a lot of people less allergenic. Or obviously, if a person's on a vegan diet, then those are options for them. But there are also foods that are high in calcium. Now, tofu, tapioca, chia seeds, collard greens, kale, and bok choy all have about 200 milligrams of calcium per serving. As a point of reference, there's about 300 milligrams in cow milk, and some plant-based milks up to 450. The amount of calcium that a person needs varies based upon their age and who they are. So younger children probably need only 600 up until puberty, when they need 800 to 1,000. Pregnant and lactating women need between 1,000 and 1,200. So it does check. So it's important to make sure that you know what a person's needs are in general. And of course, whatever the source is, making sure that you're hitting that mark on average per day. And of course, there are calcium supplements, but I would make sure that the companies, that the manufacturers are testing for lead and on a regular basis, because there has been a concern that a lot of calcium supplements on the market do contain lead. All right. So what's my take on this overall? So, number one, from what I see in the studies, raw milk may be less allergenic, as well as have allergy protecting aspects to it compared to cow milk. But illness from raw milk, it's rare, but it's real. And that is something that everybody should take into account, and why all the warnings are out there. And so if you said to me, what do I think is better? A non-contaminated, that's the important part. Raw milk is probably healthier than pasteurized milk, I meant to say. But of course, how do you know whether it's non-contaminated or not? And of course, that may depend on, again, do you have your own cow? Now, again, once weaned, humans don't need milk. We need the nutrients in there, and there's lots of other ways of getting it, although any of those forms of milk are a nice handy dandy little package to get it all. So now you maybe know a little bit more about raw milk and overall what the nutrients are in this as well as in other forms of milk. And now you can make a more educated decision for yourself. Have a nice day.